What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, the Green Bay Packers podcast for the Blue Wire family and the Eurostep Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Numac, and joining me once again for another episode in this dreary, long off season is Jordan Dresky. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Rogers Watch is alive and well. Who's gonna break first? Who's going to is uh,
Much like trade talks, you lost your vision halfway through.
yeah, I'm just exhausted of Rogers things. The Green Bay Packers exist and there are 52 other roster spots on this team.
Yes, there are.
That's where I stand at this point.
Well, thankfully, we don't have a lot of Rogers talk this week as there has been no news since the news. So, this week, we're going to kind of recap just the lay of the land of the NFL per se. Since we last recorded, since the Packers made a couple moves, mostly on the peripheral side of things, nothing too major, but a lot of exiting Packers that we ought to keep an eye on, some close, some far. So, that's basically the plan for this pod. Nothing nothing too spicy, just about a lot of discussion about our hometown Green Bay Packers. So, Jordan, should we hop right into it?
Let's hop right in. Let's see. Let's go through the transaction log, shall we?
Yes, we should. We're using SpoTrack. They have almost everything, so if we don't get everything, you can go yell at us in the GSPN Discord, gspn.info. Go join the links. We're talking all this stuff. It is 7:30 Central Standard Time. Wait, yeah, Central Standard Time, or was it daylight? We just had daylight savings. I don't know the difference. Anywho's will be right during the middle of the World Baseball Classic. So to give you minute by minute updates, if it happened after that time, we didn't catch it. So don't yell at us, or do. I don't care. The biggest Packers news that happened since we last recorded was the restructuring of Rasul Douglas. Rasul restructured, and rather converted $2.17 million of his salary this year to a roster bonus, plus an additional, to a signing bonus in addition to a $2 million roster bonus that was also converted. So in total, 4.17 million dollars converted to a signing bonus that doesn't count against the cap this year. I guess it cleared 3.3. My apologies, but big move for the Packers. I think as it sits now, they're at about $24 million in cap space. If that is about right, I can vamp while I check too. But yeah, $24 million in cap space, the fourth most team with cap space right now. But which is interesting.
And that's a real time.
Yep, that's
Okay.
as of, doesn't tell me when Spotrac last updated this, but I saw this number I think Monday or over the weekend, and it was about $24 million. So
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's in real time. Only teams ahead of them are the Texans yet. The Bears still have to spend $40 million somewhere, and then the Bengals still have $65 million. So lots of money, and I'm sure some of that might go away depending on the Rodgers trade. But getting as much as they can to start making these moves to improve the team once Rodgers is, or if and when Rodgers is traded, will be important because they have holes to fill. So the Rasul Douglas restructure, I said it last week and I was mistaken. I'm double checking with Ken Ingles' famous post that circles Twitter like once a week that this is the last thing that the Packers can do to gain some cap back out of this season. And I think the only thing off of his checklist that they have left to do was extend Rashawn Gary. That was like his personal checklist. And obviously they haven't done that yet. So technically, looking at it now, they can still restructure, trade, or cut John Runyon Jr. or Pat O'Donnell, which I don't think is saving too much money either way. But the Rasul one is pretty important given his like heightened role in the team.
Restructured trader cut is the new
Go ahead, make it explicit.
no. F Mary Kill.
Fornicate, marry, kill.
phone. Ugh.
Uh, I'm glad that I saw that coming a mile away. It's RTC, not FMK.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are like the John Runyon Jr. and Pat O'Donnell decisions are the only ones that have to do a lot with the cap, unless they extend or restructure or trade. That's a different one for you, Jordan. Darnell Savage, which I don't think they're going to do given their depth at safety right now. And they'd have to like really go pretty hard in the free agency market and the draft to feel comfortable cutting him or trading him. No, they can't cut him. I apologize. Extend him or trade him. Sort of
Yeah.
pick your poison as to which side they'd have to do. But I don't think any of those are options at this point. They still need to extend Rashawn Gary, which I think is interesting given that we need an edge rusher in the draft. If they don't get a deal done this offseason, I won't be worried per se, but it would make me nervous heading into next year or heading into next offseason. My apologies. Because,
Yes.
like, if we can't keep Rashawn Gary, we're then down an edge rusher if this one that we hopefully draft, doesn't work out. Like, and he deserves an extension from the Packers, like, and from the Packers.
Yes. Very much. Even with the injury, he's shown drastic improvement year after year.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of your cornerstone players, especially at a time when things are a little bit in flux,
Right?
shall I say. Yeah, he's a no-brain extension candidate. And even with the injury concerns, I mean, when was this? A couple months ago? They extended Elton Jenkins, and he has a
Right.
torn ACL on his, I guess, profile, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word. So yeah, injury concerns or not, Rashawn Gary is a stud. That's
That
the type of player that you want to keep around.
exactly. Absolutely. Um, and then they have to make the decision on Jordan Love's 5th year, which
Yep.
I don't think happens until the Rodgers trade. Either until the Rodgers trade or until the deadline, which the deadline is like the first week of May for them to figure out if they want to pick up Love's 5th year option, which at this point is practically a certainty. Just because if they don't, then they're up a creek without a paddle. We'll say if they if Love would walk next year.
It would, yeah. It would be a lot of us asking, well, why did you create this scenario in the first place?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
a Jordan Love 5th year option pickup is basically projected into the horizon. We just need to get there first. It's like a mirage at this point. We're hoping the mirage comes true.
What is that over there? Is that the 5th year?
It's just an opaque picture of Jordan Love and like rising in the sky like the sun.
I see it.
That's good stuff. But moving on, the Packers also re-signed Rudy Ford, another big special teamer. So definitely a plus there. Had a couple good games last year. Obviously, though I think it was the Dallas game was the one where he had the
2 picks.
yeah, the 2 picks. So that was the biggest contribution, but also just being a standout special teamer.
Yeah, he restructured his first name. Apparently, I was given the bombshell before we started recording. Rudy is not his given name; it is Jonathan, and the reason why he is referred to as Rudy is his uncle Philip gave him the nickname Rudy based on the movie of the same name.
Which is very confusing because the Packers also employ a Jonathan Ford, which is Rudy
Yes.
Ford's real name.
So we have Jonathan Ford 1 and Jonathan Ford 2, but 2 could be Rudy.
Right.
Yeah.
It's I've gotten tripped up a couple times on that. So thankfully he just goes by Rudy.
Yeah.
And Rudy
He's saving us a big problem.
saving us a big headache. So
Yeah.
appreciate you, Rudy. But yeah, I will get into the meaning of these next couple moves in a second and why I think they're significant. But to go with it, the Packers also re-signed Corey Ballentine. He's the cornerback, the 5th year player. So He was on their practice squad last year and was activated in November. So basically a depth guy, but majorly a special teams guy. And I think all of these signings that they've had that have been like re-signings or free agency signings, like we talked about Matthew Orzek last year being the long snapper um that they signed. I think
Super
it's
Bowl pedigree.
that's right. I think it's very good that we're letting special teams coach Rich Biasacha bring in these special teams players that matter and that he thinks are plus players, because the more we can build like institutional knowledge is a stupid way to say it, but like organizational knowledge of how to run a good special teams unit for multiple years in a row is going to be good. Because I don't think this offseason is going to be a one-off happening when it comes to Rich Biasacha's candidacy as a head coach. And so I like that Goody and Matt LaFleur will have an opportunity to see how Rich Biasacha does these things, so that if he goes and gets a head coaching job, which I think he's more than capable of doing, considering he almost led the Raiders to the playoffs 2 years ago as an interim head coach, that they have this roadmap of what a successful special teams unit looks like and can build off these habits and trends and like practices for life after Rich Biasacha, if that comes soon. Bisaccia, not Biasacha. My apologies.
Yeah, I mean the fact that he is what the associate head coach, so he's the number two to LaFleur at this point,
Yeah.
kind of signals, hey, you're gonna have a not that they made a big deal about getting him in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
but it's even more say about how they want to run things.
Yep.
Um, yeah, that's we know how the Packers operate in free agency. Regardless, they aren't ones to strike while the iron's hot or the floodgates open and it's like throwing crazy money.
Right.
Devondre Campbell is probably the best example of like a guy that signed way later in the offseason. I want to say it was like June of 2021 when that happened. And then he blossoms into this all pro that, that season. They take their time and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean that these moves can't have a big impact. We've seen what bad special teams look like,
Mm-hmm.
and as little as they matter on the scoreboard or the overall uh, direction of the roster, it's a tone setter,
Mm-hmm.
and they, it's they're playing in the margins at this point, and that very well can tilt things in so many different directions, especially after going through a season like this where it came down to the last game and
Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. So yeah, I think there's obviously been a strong theme of where and how the Packers have operated this offseason or this free agency period so far.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean it can't change, but it's been very thematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the biggest one was Keyshawn Nixon. That was the biggest re-signing they had. Obviously, a special teams guy. Like his main role on this team is special teams, even though I think he can play as a secondary player. But yeah, all the signings have been special teams, and I'm just a big fan of it as we stand right now. Obviously, there's a lot more holes to fill with the money they have available to sign players, but as it stands with the moves they're able to make pre Rogers trade, making sure that your special teams unit is in order is a good move by this fan, because we've watched crap special teams play for a decade and a half and it wasn't fun. And when it was fun for the last 8 games last year, it was a lot of fun. It like set the tone, as you said, just for the rest of the season and that push towards the playoffs. So I think it's, like I said, important that they're getting this shored up early, and I think they'll get their pickings worth of whoever they want to pay in a couple weeks here or in June of this coming June. But you were right. Devondre Campbell signed June 8th that year. So,
June 8th.
yep. So, still time for a lot of these things. Obviously, you're not going to find a Devondre, you're not going to find a Razul every year to kind of make those all pro jumps, but there's options. There's always trade cuts or roster cuts in the summer and things like that, but we're far ways
Mm-hmm.
off of that. The Packers also signed Tavarius Moore to a vet min deal. Tavarius Moore, the former 49ers safety. So, big thing with him, really big RAS score. He fits the Goody mold. He really, he's an athlete, real fast. And if I'm not mistaken, just from some of the light research I was doing, um, did really well his rookie year, and then I think he had an interception of Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken.
Got called back, I believe.
Was it? Okay.
I believe that's what it was, or something like that.
I see one interception in the 2019 playoffs.
Oh no, he did get it.
So
Never mind.
it might be a different interception. I'm just letting you know that that's what I'm seeing on what you call it, Spell Track, or not Spell Track, Pro Football Reference. Um, but yeah, it's a safety. He had I think he got injured in 2020 and then re-injured himself in or not 2020. 2020.
2021
Yeah.
ruptured his Achilles tendon during practice,
Ouchie.
and then was placed on the pup list at the end of training camp. That's not a 1 year injury. That is a 2 year injury. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty rough break.
Yeah. But thankfully, good for the Packers because I think he is good depth, and if he can just sort of play to his strengths of being a fast guy and a fast tackler, maybe a bit of a ball hawk, if he can roam the secondary, I'm fine with it. Cheap deal, like I said, a million bucks. And I think not too much of it is guaranteed. So I'm quite fine on taking the flyer. Frankly, I think it's a good
Yeah,
find, and just
yeah,
we'll see. Like we all know that safety is a not gonna say an issue, but it's definitely a priority for this offseason. And if you can take flyers on a guy where uh his dead cap is $50,000, so like I if they cut him, it's cheap. If
it's
he doesn't make if
yeah,
he doesn't make it to training camp, it's $50,000. As
yeah,
opposed to if he makes it the team, he gets it's a 1 year deal, 1 year deal for $1 million. So it could work out great. It could work out not at all. It's a good like what's the word? Good bet, we'll say. Just it
yep.
works out. He works out. Good for the Packers.
Low
It
risk,
doesn't.
high reward.
That's what I was looking for. That's what I
Yeah,
was looking for. So, um, expect moves either in the draft or more free agency on the safety part, or news that Razul's going to move there. But other than that, not too much else from the Packers. Their side essentially. That was really the only like four moves they've had, three moves they've had since the Rodgers trade or trade announcement, trade demand announcement, and then Keisha Nixon before that. So not a whole lot yet. I think it's the Packers waiting for the first domino to fall in the Rodgers trade until the draft. And if we don't, if the Packers don't trade Rodgers at the draft, I think that's when you're really going to start seeing some of these signings.
yep,
Hopefully that they come sooner because the draft is still a month away, and a lot of players can get signed in a month. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I think if you wait longer to spend that money, that's going to hamper your ability to improve through free agency. So let's talk about the rest of the NFL. There's a couple of big names that moved around that would have been good for the Packers to target, but also kind of affected the NFC North standing. So we'll do a quick little roundup of the NFL and see how that really affects the Packers, how the Packers could have possibly traded for some of these guys or why they didn't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big first one. Big first one. Brandon Cooks traded the Cowboys after they just traded Amari Cooper away, which is peculiar, I'll say. I think the that Brandon Cooks was for sure done in Houston. Like he wanted to be out there at the trade deadline, and then they didn't trade him, obviously, and now they did. Like I just think that he was very much not going to want to play for the Texans any longer, and they appeased that request.
very good move from them Cowboys have had a sneakily good offseason, in my opinion. Um, Kind of what they need, especially next to CeeDee Lamb.
Hmm.
I know there's injury concerns with Cooks. It's more of like he's had a lot of concussions, I believe.
Yeah, it's
Um,
a lot of concussions and a lot of like ticky tack stuff. Nothing like major structurally.
but he's been like he's not like he's a big name, and I think I don't know, he's kind of it's a weird area that he fulfills, like in how like you look at him because he's not like a like his I'm struggling to even describe this. But he's not like an OBJ of like these guys that like regardless of where they are, they bring star power.
Yeah.
Brandon Cooks is a very good football player and he's been traded a lot of times,
Hmm.
but still very productive and until he got to the Texans kind of elevates teams in a lot of ways, or at least their receiving core. Um, I I think he just kind of landed in the perfect spot for him. Um, and again, just going to a winning team, they need some another passing weapon or pass catcher next to Lamb to kind of
Yeah.
uh, elevate the passing game for Dallas. So yeah, big move for them, and kind of just I don't know, keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on them.
Yeah. Brandon Cooks reminds me a lot of T.Y. Hilton. Just like a really
That is exactly yes. Yep,
a
I
really
like that.
good football player, a really good receiver, but he doesn't have like the big game ability to really break out for a season. Like he'll
Yep.
have games where he goes for a huge amount of yards, a few touchdowns, and is like, "Wow, Brandon Cooks won me my fantasy matchup this week." But then he'll have other weeks where he kind of disappears, which like is the nature of honestly like wide receivers 6 through 20. Like really only the top five receivers are going to get you that week in week out uh, production that really can bolster an offense in a significant way and um, in a consistent way. And I just don't think Brandon Cooks is that. Relating to the Packers, I think that the Packers would have liked Brandon Cooks to put alongside Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs. I think
Yep.
there was there was rumors, tweets, et cetera, of the Packers trying to get Brandon Cooks at the deadline this past year. Never came to be. Mostly because I think it just is his contract. I can't find it now. Here it is. He's on the hook for 2 years, about $40 million. It looks like this year his cap hit is $12 million, and next year it's 6 million with one void year. So I just think that 12 million was unfortunately too rich for the Packers' blood this year, given their issues with Rodgers' cap hit. Should however it's going to be. So I think that the Packers would have gladly traded the fifth and the sixth that the Cowboys traded for him to get him because it's really cheap for Brandon Cooks. I
Mhm.
just don't think it worked out money wise to spend half their cap on a player that could be either wide receiver one, two, or three, depending on how his production shakes out.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, because I think Watson and Dobbs are shaping up to be one and two or one A, one B, however you want to see it. And if Brandon Cooks doesn't immediately surpass them, which he could, he's a talented wide receiver, then it's $12 million not well spent to go with a big cap hit next year, but then $6 million of dead cap if they were to cut him, which is a significant cap hit, considering that is a 20 $6 million is 25% of our cap right now. Like
Yeah.
that's a big cap hit for a team that is struggling with cap in the first place.
Yeah.
So it sucks that he went for such a low price. I think there was a lot of teams besides the Cowboys that would have been like, yeah, I would have paid a fifth and a sixth for Brandon
Hmm.
Cooks. I just think maybe the Houston Texans worked with him where he wanted to go. And also, I think, like you said, it really fits nicely for Dak. Um, Prescott to throw to him next to CeeDee Lamb. The other Cowboy news, couple of Cowboy news is, as you said, sneaky good offseason so far. They made the smart choice to cut Zeke. Ezekiel Elliott no longer a Dallas Cowboy. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that Zeke is a post June 1,
Yes,
um,
that is why I saw it too.
yeah, whatever the word is, like cap casualty. That's not the word, but um, they basically designated him for it to be cut after June 1 to lower his cap hit for their sheet this year. He's really taken a dip, sadly. Like he was always fun as a player to watch. He's, we'll say, a lively NFL football player. Definitely has a personality to him, which is just fine. But with the rise of Tony Pollard and how well he's been in both the running and the receiving game, his Zeke's contract didn't justify the production he was getting, which was the biggest
Yep.
thing when they signed that contract. Like everyone says, don't pay running backs, right? And then
Yeah.
Jerry Jones went and paid Zeke a huge deal. Worked out for the first couple of years, but as of the last couple of years, it was not not sufficient enough to pay that sort of price for running back when they have other things they need to address. So, Tony Pollard blew up his knee in Minnesota this past year, I believe. I think it was that game. So, I think he's out for a little while. He'll probably be out the first game, or maybe he'll make it for the first game. But subsequently, they signed Ronald Jones. I believe he was in Buffalo or Tampa before that.
Tampa originally. Then I think he was on KC last year.
That's right.
They
That's right.
didn't use him.
Yep, that's right. Because I remember when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went down and they cut him, or however that shook out. They they signed him. I was like, oh, that's a good pickup for them. They just never used him. They used Isaiah Pacheco instead, which is the smart move probably.
Yeah.
Um, so they signed Ronald Jones probably to be the workhorse before Tony Pollard gets back. Again, just good move. Get a cheap running back that has NFL experience that can hold down the fort while your main guy comes back. So,
Yep.
and same thing. I think he's just Zeke, but Zeke light. Same sort of style of runner, like power runner. Not gonna razzle dazzle you with moves, but he'll get yards as he needs to. And
Certainly saw that in the Buccaneers Packers championship game a couple years ago.
yep, that's right. He had his way. Um, Last bit of Packers Cowboys news: Dalton Schultz signs with the Texans. I think.
Really? I didn't even see that.
Yep. A
Interesting.
1 year deal, not too much. I think it was about $9 million ish. And so, um, I think this news broke, what's today? Tuesday. I think the news broke Monday. And
That, yeah.
yeah, 1 year,
Okay.
$9 million. The news broke Monday. And I think over the weekend, I saw he was a free agent. I was like, man, like, if he can stay a free agent for the next week or couple days, wouldn't mind giving him a 1 year deal just to do it. Like I would have paid him this deal if he was willing to like stick around a little longer. Like
Especially
stick in free agency a little longer.
considering the Packers incumbent tight end is no longer the Packers incumbent tight end.
Right. Like the Packers are for all intents and purposes losing Mercedes Lewis, I'd imagine.
Yes.
But then before Dalton Schultz's contract, uh, Bobby Tunyon signed with the Bears,
Yes.
which is again fine. We didn't really know what to expect with Bobby Tunyon, but he ends up signing with the Bears on a pretty cheap deal. I think his
It's
was
1 year, four,
four and a
five,
half.
something like that. Four and a
Yeah.
half.
So, um, a little production loss as we talked about. Like he had that big year. Was that 2021 or 20? He had the big year.
20 because he got hurt the
Yeah. Yeah.
21.
Yeah.
Then this year, yeah.
Sorry, 1 year, 2.5 million for Bobby Tunyon to sign with the
Is it only
Bears.
2.5?
2.6. Yeah.
Oh,
So that
not that
news
that really changes
broke.
anything.
That news broke on the 16th, and 4 days later, Dalton Schultz signs with the Texans. And I think if the Packers were able to bring Dalton Schultz in at this number or a little less, however you want to look at it, would have been a knock out of the park for the Packers. I think they obviously have a needed tight end, and getting a 1 year deal for a guy like Dalton Schultz, who has proven he can do good things. Like he was a pretty big part of that Cowboys offense throughout the last year and years prior. Would have been good. Would have been pretty great to have. But alas, not to be. the Texans get a pretty nice safety valve option for whoever they decide to draft with their whatever quarterback they decide to draft with their top pick this year.
Well, I think too, to kind of, I guess, bring this larger theme, and we'll bring in another addition that we're going to talk about too. Tunyon gets picked up. Dalton Schultz, Dalton Schultz gets picked up. Mike Gesicki goes with the Patriots from Miami.
Yep,
So, of what limited, I think even OJ Howard, who
he did sign. I think he signed with the Raiders.
Raider, yes. So, free agency has taken a very tight end heavy turn. Um, and with all the uncertainty in that way, or like from that lens, you know, if the Packers make any other move in free agency besides, adding to Tyler Davis,
Yeah.
um, it's very much going to be a death piece or, kind of stopgap kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
because who else are you going to turn to? I don't even know who the best uh, or most attractive tight end available at this point in terms of like someone who has production to this team. I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you in a second once I get the the table sorted. But to go kind of backwards before we get into who's available, yeah, this year has been a lot of like single year deals for tight ends, basically on prove it deals. Tight ends
Yep.
are interesting positions. Like the top tight ends, George Kittle, Travis Kelsey, Darren Waller, and the rest of them are good at blocking and pass catching, but they get paid for their pass catching essentially.
Yep.
Like that's where their value lies. And the rest of the way down, tight ends 5 through probably the rest of them, there's so much variance week to week that it's hard to reliably bet on which one's going to be good, where you can find value. But for the Saints, the Jawan Johnson, I don't know if you remember Jordan, but Jawan Johnson, the man who torched the Packers week 1 of 2021,
Oh yeah.
2 years, $12 million extension from the Saints. As we talked last week, Josh Oliver signed with the Vikings. Josh Oliver, more power to you. Never heard of you in my life. The Patriots traded Jonu Smith for a 7th round pick. Like that's not a lot of value. They just didn't want on his contract anymore. Same thing with Darren Waller being traded to the Giants. Hayden Hurst signs a big deal. He's one of those top guys with the Panthers for a $7 million year average, 3 years, 21 million. And then Bobby Tunyon for a year, 2.6. Jordan Akins, 2 years, 4 million. Like that's cheap. The Chargers signed Donald Parham, who's like their second string tight end essentially, to a 2 year, $2 million deal. Mike Gesicki got 1.4. OJ Howard signed with the Raiders. They didn't say his number yet. And then Dalton Schultz on a 1 year, $9 million deal. Like there's a lot of variance here to where is it really worth any of these guys? Who really knows? Like I think Dalton Schultz and Mike Gesicki are really the only two guys there that I'm really interested in really having, frankly. Like that would have been guys who signed who I wish we'd have gotten. But as for players that haven't been signed yet, Cameron Brate was released from the Buccaneers. Don't have a strong opinion on him. Like I would give him a super small deal if they signed him. Um, former great tight end Austin Hooper. He's a
Former great.
well.
He's not.
Do you,
I
I
think
think
he's
he's fine.
decent.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
fine. But like, do you remember the times where like
Oh, he
Austin
got
Hooper,
paid. Yeah, he
like
got super paid.
yeah, like he was
Yeah.
good. I think the Browns super paid him, right?
Browns paid him after being with the Falcons.
Right. Um, old man Kyle Rudolph, former Viking Irv Smith is available. Um, Tyler Croft, the old Bengals tight end, he's available. Like
Foster Moreau, Waller's backup, is a free agent, and I believe looking at other teams that aren't the Raiders. So I don't know what they're going to do there.
I'd love if they signed Foster Moreau. The Packers did. I would think that'd be quite a good signing.
The mystery author, Foster Moreau.
That's right. Anthony, I've seen his name for so long. I don't know how it's pronounced. Anthony Firkser, the old Tennessee tight end. Firkser. How would you pronounce it, Jordan? Through your lens.
No, I think you're right. It's just a funny name, Tony Ferkser.
Yeah, you guys can roast me in the GSP Discord if I'm pronouncing it wrong. And so like
Zero Ferks given.
the tight end options in the free agency market right now are grim. Like it makes sense
Which,
as to
if you
why.
contrast with how people are talking about the tight ends in this draft class,
Yeah,
it's, you know what I mean? It's like, well, you know, it's interesting that I mean, we're going to go on a tangent.
I go on the tangent.
John Smith is a decent tight end.
He's fine.
He's fine. But you made a big decision to draft Kyle Pitts, who looked to be this generational talent that you have wasted so far in your first 2 years of having him. Unless if you're trying to do like a very Patriots thing of like Gronk and Hernandez like tight ends. Those are people that existed.
They
And
are players. One of those players certainly existed.
yes. Um I don't know. I don't know what that's where it's like the Packers would never do this. But do you just like, hey, Kyle Pitts is undervalued? Because I would imagine there are a lot of teams that are like, why are you doing this?
Yeah,
Can you get him for
I think I think the Falcons got him one because he's fine. I think you have the right idea in that maybe they want to run a two tight end set to give whatever quarterback they're going to employ. Desmond Ritter is their quarterback right now to throw to. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But at the same time, the Falcons stink. They're not good. Maybe
no?
they just wanted to take a flyer on a seventh round pick to take on his contract and see how it works. Like maybe they find money in Jonu Smith to be a good production person or a good value as like a catching tight end to make up for the fact that they don't really have receivers. Like Kyle Pitts and Jonu Smith will be kind
Drake London.
of that's
Did they signed am I wrong? Matt Collins? Or did he go
uh
somewhere
I
else?
think you're right. I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, they got Matt Collins.
Which needle mover, sure. The tiniest little little blip over. Yeah, 1 year, $2.5 million deal. So, but I think the biggest thing for them is that we'll just see, right? Because um, Johnu Smith's contract is $10 million this year, and they have an out after this year with no dead cap. They don't have to
Yeah.
bring him back next year for anything if it turns out to be a horrible experiment and it's a tire fire. Then they got a seventh round pick for a 1 year, $10 million deal, and they can cut their ties. So it's a weird move. I agree. I see the vision, like you said.
Yeah.
Um,
But
Go ahead.
going back to the Packers, it is just like sooner or later something's gonna be done about tight end. And
It has to be.
yeah, of course.
Well,
While we have our eyes set on the draft and these shiny new toys that
yeah.
could pair with Jordan Love,
I
they
want
are going to sign a veteran tight end.
Yes. I want to talk about that shiny new toy with tight end in like 5 minutes when we're done with the rest of the free agent recap. Because
Yeah.
I think like I want to talk through a scenario, but we have like three short things left to go through. The Lions signed CJ Gardner Johnson. That's gonna be a problem. That's a problem for the Packers.
Lions coming for that number one spot.
Listen, I got told up and down during our NFL predictions pod, the one of the first ones from one Ty Windish, that the Lions weren't good and they weren't building towards anything. I've been on this lap on this. I've staked my claim on Lions Island. They're
You ain't
building.
lying.
I ain't lying. They're building something good. Like I said to the Discord, to people, to whatever, that I don't think it'd be a terrible idea if the Lions want to move on from Jared Goff, because I think Jared Goff, while he's having a good year under Dan Campbell, has had good years under Dan Campbell, and just has had a just a tiny bit, just the littlest bit of a renaissance since coming to Detroit. I think the ceiling with Goff is only so high, right? And I don't think it's Super Bowl winning caliber quarterback. Like I just don't think he's that quarterback anymore. I know he had success with Sean McVay with in the Rams. That they made a Super Bowl with Jared Goff, right? They
Yeah,
lost. Yeah,
the Patriots one, one
yeah.
of the ugliest
One of
Super
the
Bowls
ugliest
of
Super Bowls
my
ever.
lifetime.
Like I think that Jared Goff went there on the back of Sean McVay, and I don't know if he can do that with the Lions and Dan Campbell.
I will say though, it's not a surprise who made that decision to bring in Goff, considering Brad Holmes, I believe that's his name, the GM of the Lions, Mr. Holmes,
Maybe.
I presume, um, was a part of the Rams brain trust before getting the gig in Detroit, overlooking Ford Field.
2003 to 2020, he was with the Rams, so you're right.
2003 to 2020. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, so he saw Jared Goff up close and personnel.
Right. So my idea was the Cardinals pick at 3. Why not trade the Cardinals
The
6?
team?
Yep, sure. Um, the Lions move up to 3, and they get their choice of Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, or Bryce Young, and then trade 6, which is the Lions pick. Um, the Vikings second round pick they own, which is the 55th pick,
Yeah.
and then next year they have the Vikings third round pick, I believe. So trade essentially 6, 55, and then a Lions second next year, and the Vikings third for 3 to move up three spots and get your pick of a rookie quarterback to get yourself on this timeline with DeAndre Swift, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Jameson Williams, with Aiden Hutchinson. It's all the same timeline. They're all cheap right now. And if you can get because right now the North is wide open. Like we know this. Like without Aaron Rodgers in the NFC North, it's wide open. You can win your division, which is a very important thing for the Lions. Lions winning the division, biggest accomplishment in a very long time.
That's their
Besides,
last one out.
since they last won it, essentially. Besides beating Rodgers twice in 1 year, like that's they did that this past year, which was their
I
biggest.
think we're about to become a Lions podcast because I understand. I yes, you want to build the two tracks of team building.
Right, and I think the Lions are going to be a bigger problem than the Bears or the Vikings
Oh, without a doubt, I think they're
for the
number
significant future.
significant future for sure. It's also much
At
clearer.
least the next 3 years.
Yes, I think they are making all the right moves. I think I
Yeah,
would put them as the number one team
I would as
in the
well.
North for next year.
I would as well. Um, all that being said, them signing C.J. Gardner Johnson is going to be a problem. It just
Yeah.
will be. He's a great player. It's a 1 year deal. Hopefully he has his great year and gets paid by somebody else that isn't in the NFC North. That'd be fantastic. um, and I think the last one we got to talk about is Dean Lowry. Did we talk about Dean?
We do not.
Sign with the
The
Vikings.
Dean of Students gone.
I think it was a short deal, not too much. 1 year, 2 year,
2 year, 8 million, whatever
or what?
actually is, I
just
believe.
just fine. At least we know Love's front side pressure is going to be just fine next year. I got to play it for 2 games out of the year. So that's really it on the free agency stuff. Um, going back briefly before we end about the tight ends. Um, big buzz on Twitter this week. Darnell Washington Jr. Right? Yeah, Darnell Washington Jr. Now I got to double check myself because I'm gonna feel like a dickhead if I have it wrong. Um, posted a blank, just Darnell Washington, not a junior. Um, posted a blank all black Instagram story with the geotag of Green Bay, Wisconsin. I think that was like today or something, Tuesday. Which got people going that they're going to possibly draft him at 15. If this is a big if, Jordan. If the Packers don't get 13, they don't have the Jets' first round pick. Are you comfortable drafting Darnell Washington, a tight end, at 15, as opposed to drafting an edge rusher or a safety or any of the other sort of, how do I say this, higher priority, more impactful positions that the Packers need? Because as we just talked about, tight ends, a lot of variance. A lot of
A
variance.
lot of variance, and he obviously had a very strong showing at the combine. How much stock do you put that in?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this exists totally in the NBA too. I mean, like between not to make I'm making this analogy of it because it's March Madness time and all this stuff. But you see a player rise out of nowhere, and makes this huge run, and it it changes his whole outlook of I'm going to go pro. I'm going to get drafted in the first round. I have these guarantees and all that stuff. It's different in football, obviously. Lower, there's always so many events where between the combine, Senior Bowl, I'm probably going to miss something else between draft season and stuff
Pro
like that.
days.
Like pro days, of course. Um, that it's the high or not hindsight, but it's the freshest thing. It's like, oh my god, like that guy is I can't miss because of this,
Right.
because athleticism, all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I think either way, like putting a huge stock into that in a position that is of need, but if you look all across the Packers roster, there's certainly a
There's
lot of
certainly more positions of need. Like, it's not just tight end.
yes, safety certainly comes to mind. At this point, you brought up the point of edge rusher. You could never have enough edge rushers. That's what I've been told.
Right.
Um, yeah, like I don't know. I would be fine with it, but it's certainly not a comfortable bet.
Right.
And that's not even getting into how Goody historically operates, where
Yep.
he likes a guy regardless of what the prospect looks like in aggregate, kind of thing like that. Like where is he valued in draft classes?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
For what it's worth, the first tight end off the board is Dalton Kincaid at 16 to the Commanders. The second is Michael Mayer to the Cowboys at 26. And the third is Darnell Washington at 28 to the Bengals, who are in desperate need of a tight end. So all that being said, I don't think they have an opportunity to get Darnell Washington in the second round, which was kind of the idea going into the draft pre-combine was, hey, can we snag him in the second? I don't think he'll be there. I think he does not fall that far, which makes this decision harder because I think, like you said, everybody fell in love with the combine video, and I think that plays so well into what the Packers love out of their tight ends.
yeah,
He said he modeled his game after Mercedes Lewis, which would work great to bring in the next Mercedes Lewis or the
big pup,
proposed the big pup, the
Clifford.
proposed Darnell Washington or next Mercedes Lewis, and see how it goes. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it would be something a lot of fans, myself included, would point to if it didn't work out years down the line. It'd be a huge hindsight thing, but I think it would have to matter in the context of, hey, you're drafting a tight end top 20, top 15. Like, is that really the best use of that pick? Is it better for Lucas Van Ness? Is it better for Brian Branch, who's going 17 on this mock? Like, is it better for Quentin Johnson or Jackson Smith Jigba? It's just like, where do they value? What do they need to make this a better team? And it's one of those things that's like, oh, okay, we played it safe. We took probably a more surefire bet at an edge rusher or something, or a safety, or whatever position you want to do an offensive tackle at 15. Maybe he tumbles to the second round. Maybe we make a move for a late pick in the first round, trade up with some picks. I think doing that makes the most sense right now, as opposed to if they did draft the tight end and it didn't work out. It's probably one of those things that if we're Goody to be fired, that'd be like, yeah, he picked Jordan Love at 24 before Rodgers was even close to retiring. Then he picked um, a tight end in top 15 the first year of Jordan Love's tenure. Like
Yeah.
it's
At
those
the
things, right?
same, yeah, it's a hard part of this is
It's an incredibly
the
difficult job because
yes.
your feelings change day to day. You're like
Yeah. Game to game.
you sit there and you think and you rack your brain about what this team needs. It's like, man, they just really need somebody opposite of Rashawn Gary. And you're like, oh, man, but without Mercedes Lewis on the outside, their run game kind of suffers, and they don't have that outside sort of blocker to help get Aaron Jones to set an edge to get
And
outside.
then
And it's
on
like
top of that, you're making the move to Jordan Love. You want to put him in the best position to succeed.
another
You
blocker
don't
does
have
that.
another blocker, and you don't have enough pass catching or playmakers to
Right.
do that too.
So
So
it's entirely like
it's a high wire act.
right, and it's to say that if Darnell Washington is the pick at 15, I'm not going to be like rebel, rebel, rebel. What are you doing picking 15 of a tight end? Because I think he has talent. I really think he does, and I think the strength that he showed is very, very valuable for what the Packers do. So if they take him, it'd probably be a reach, and I'd be okay with the reach. And I think
Yeah.
that's the experiment and the thought process I wanted to go with you with, because I think there's a real possibility of it happening.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm, mm,
Anything else,
mm.
Jordan?
No, I mean, everybody's going to be consumed by any turn of Rogers stuff, but
Yeah,
we talked about it at length.
yeah.
It's probably not going to happen anytime soon.
I
Just got to keep reminding each other about this of
yeah,
like,
and like it's natural to talk about it in like context of other things, but if we just talked about Aaron Rodgers for the next what June 1 is when they could cut him next to get less cap off the books. June 1, so 2.5 months. I think we lose a lot of you guys as listeners, so we gotta mix it up a little bit. Even though the
mm,
obvious storyline right now is number 12 himself. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode. Couple of promotions, just the regular stuff before we head out. Go over to Repod. Again, I've said it week in, week out for the last, what, couple months, Jordan? Gotta go join Repod. Gotta go talk over there. Gotta go talk to Tundra over there on Repod. You guys know where to find it. Joinrepod.com/talk of the Tundra. Go check it out. We'd appreciate it. GSPN World, the Eurostep boys talked about our Lord and Savior Brooke Lopez and did an appreciation pod on him that came out Monday. So go listen to Ty and Rohan talk about the big man in the middle. I guess we'll call the middle of the defense, and just give him some of his flowers, which he has earned significantly. Other way of the Bucks pods, if I'm not mistaken, Jordan, your special pod will be out by the time this comes out Thursday morning. Correct? Do you
mm.
wanna announce that pre it being announced? It being
Yeah,
released?
Rohan and I talked to the mayor of Milwaukee, Bobby Portis
Wow.
Jr.
Wow.
Wow. Yes, we talked to him at his launch party of his podcast, Keep It a Buck, which is on Podcast One. It was a very good time. Very nice meeting Bobby, a class act, if you will. And we got to talk to him. And the sound is not very good, but we recorded an intro and outro to make sure that you guys understand that we know it's not that great. But hopefully you get some kind of kick out of it because Rowan and I were very much buzzing after talking to Bobby Portis.
Jordan and Rohan are selling themselves short on the quality of this audio. It is perfectly fine, people. You will go listen to it, and you'll be able to
I
hear.
thought you were just going to trash it. Like, it
You're
is
going
borderline
no,
unlistenable.
no, they're selling it short. You're gonna go and listen to this podcast because you all want to hear Bobby Porras talk, and you'll be able to hear the conversation just fine. I listened to it. I gave it a listen. there wasn't a single thing I missed in the conversation. So go check it out. It's a really good one, and thanks to you guys for going to do that. Secondarily, rather thirdly, try. I'm not even gonna do what that word is after it comes after secondary for the third ones. You and Adam have Wood and Six coming out. What would be today as you're listening to this, or no,
We
Friday.
will be recording today.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll be talking about the Bucks after the Spurs game, somewhat after the Raptors game.
Ooh, you can talk about Mamu. Hopefully, Mamu plays.
You probably will.
Yeah.
He's
I've
been
heard
wilding out there.
somebody in the Spurs organization said he was a keeper, which is nice to see. Good for Mamu.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's just about it on things I can confirm. I don't want to speak for anybody else that's not here, but go check out Cruising for a Bruising as they ramp up towards the Brewer season, which opens in just about a week and a half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a Thursday.
yeah. Next, holy moly, it's next Thursday.
Hmm.
Holy moly! So yeah, go check out their coverage of all things spring training, and as they wrap up the World Baseball Classic, and then go check out Make Time for This and all of the catalogs of movies and TV shows and all of the wonderful things Andrew and Adam talk about on Make Time for This. I think they just released. I think we talked about this last pod, but they just released their top 10 movies of the year post
Yep.
Oscars. So if you haven't checked that out, go check it out. Thank you guys all for listening and tuning in to our wonderfully optimistic Packers podcast. I am Numac. He is Jordan. Thank you for listening. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you, Numac.